All right. Why don't we go ahead and get started? All right. So today we're going to do something special. We are going to have a hands-on workshop for our DevOps Change Velocity product. And what that means is if you've registered beforehand, you would have received an email with instructions on how to set up an environment to participate in the lab. Also, there is a reservation page I'm going to show you to get an instance for the lab. So there's two parts of it. There's the DevOps Change Velocity solution that's on a ServiceNow instance, and we'll give you one of those. And what we're hoping is if you've read the instructions, you've managed to create your own Azure DevOps environment as well. Okay. But first, a couple of housekeeping things here. We have the safe harbor notice. Basically, what this means is I don't anticipate talking too much about the future direction of the product or any features that might come up. But this basically means if I do happen to do that, it shouldn't be construed as a contractual obligation. And however, anytime we do talk about futures, we are making a best effort to make sure those arrive on time, those features. I'm Joe Offenberg. I'm an outbound product manager in our DevOps business unit. We also have some of my colleagues on the phone. We have Ananda here. He's our director of product management here at ServiceNow. We have Eileen Leung. She's also part of the product management team. Graydon Buckley is one of our engineers that works on the product. He's one of our lead engineers for DevOps Change Velocity. And this is what we're going to be covering today. So the first thing I'd like you to do is go ahead and reserve your instance. So you should see a link here. And whoops, sorry about that. And this link, the C Labs link, DevOps WS-June 6763. This will take you to a page that's going to then request that code. Now, the reason I'm asking you to do this now is because in some cases it can take a little bit of time for that instance to wake up. So this way, by the time we go through some of the slides and we switch over to the live part of the workshop, you'll be ready to go. Some of these instances might, even though they appear awake and you can log in, they don't really wake up until you log into them. And that's been our experience, that kind of like if you have teenagers at home, sometimes you have to wake them up once or twice or three times even before they're ready to start their day. So this is very similar to that. So first, let's talk. I'm going to put this link, I think, in the chat, just in case. Maybe if we can go ahead and do that, Eileen, so that everybody can see the link in the Zoom chat. So
yes, it's in the Zoom chat, so please register there.
Awesome. Okay, so let's talk about why we need this solution. We've had customers at ServiceNow coming to us for about 5 or 6 years now, saying, "Hey, we have these DevOps teams, and they've automated all the steps of their software delivery lifecycle all the way through to production." Right? They have these things called DevOps pipelines, and they want to deploy to production. And right now, the change management process doesn't allow them to do that. They have to open up a change request. They have to attach all of the documentation to it, the test results, the security scans. There's usually a lot of interaction. Sometimes there's even a change approval board that they have to, that only meets every couple of weeks. So we needed to solve this problem. And we did this by automating the events and the creation of this change record. So the events that come in from these DevOps tools allow us to create these change records in an automated way. So the solution today is very much about connecting to these DevOps tools, right? Because there's tons of them, and it's really fragmented, and it's really difficult to understand, across the lifecycle what tools are involved, right? And there's a lot of fragmentation in that area. And then it's difficult to have traceability across this from beginning to end. And when I say beginning, I'm talking about the ideation process, very beginning in, let's say, your Jira projects or your Azure DevOps board projects, where you create your work items, your defects, your bugs, and so forth. So we want to be able to capture that information and then provide traceability all the way through to the production deployment. And that includes gathering up all the data for the change record. And what's going to happen is this is going to help us speed up time to delivery but also it's going to give a lot of time back to the developers. So help us solve some of these challenges you see on the screen here. So just three key points is they're going to get time back. The auditors are going to be very happy because they're going to have comprehensive change records, and the pipelines are going to go faster. They're going to be able to deliver features and fix bugs and defects. They're going to be able to do that faster and get that out to production faster with what we're going to do today. Okay. So just to take you through how the solution works is we connect to your DevOps tools and basically provide them the information they need to send us events. So we get all the events from all the tools that are relative to what we're trying to accomplish here, which is automate the creation of a change record. But we don't just automate the creation of the record. We also populate it with lots of really good information that comes from the DevOps tools and that comes from the DevOps pipeline, such as what's being changed, right? The commit records, who's changing it, why is it being changed, right? We get this from the work items in Jira or our own SPM solution. What are some of the risks involved? Did they pass all the tests? And once we have all that information, we could take it a step further by automating the approval of that change, right? And at the same time, while we're collecting all of this information, we're also able to provide, we give back the information to these development teams on these insights dashboards. And these are not just, change management data. This is also very much data that they use, industry standard DevOps data like the DORA metrics or the flow metrics for value stream management on these dashboards. Okay, so just to understand, help you understand, we're not replacing any of the systems of record that you use today in your development environment. So if you're still using Jira, that's great. We're going to get the user stories from Jira. If it's Azure DevOps boards or Rally, we're going to bring that data into the platform. When they develop and they build their applications, we're going to get information from Git. We're going to get the commit records. We're going to get the test results. And when the pipelines run, we're going to get all of the stages of the pipelines and all the statuses of those stages. And especially when something is deployed to production, we're going to be able to create this change record, right? So you'll see we have all the different pieces of the puzzle that we need to create this comprehensive change record. And that's very much our operational systems of record. And for the most part, this is one way. We could do this in a passive way without disturbing the development process, the application development process. We want to do this in a passive way. However, we are a very valuable source of feedback. ServiceNow has tons of feedback data like incidents and outages and availability information and information from the monitoring tools that we could provide as feedback back to the developers. So it's very important that the development teams understand that they're not just providing access. We also have the ability to give them back some data. Okay. So what we're going to do in the lab today is basically connect your DevOps Change Velocity ServiceNow instance, right? So by now you should have been able to reserve your instance and connect to one of those lab machines, and also connect it to an Azure DevOps project. Okay, and in that project, we're going to have some work items. We're going to have some pipelines that you can run, and then you'll see how this setup works and how we could then connect to the Azure DevOps and discover the pipelines. And then when the pipelines run, you'll see how we can create a change record. Okay. At this point, I'm about to switch over to the lab. Eileen, are there any questions in the chat? How are we doing in the chat?
Yeah, I don't see any at this time, but for those that haven't, please make sure you have your instance reserved from one of the previous links and download the lab guide. The PDF is there in the chat as well.
Yeah, great. So what I'll do is I'll switch over. What I can do is I can bring up that registration link so everybody can see what's involved there. And I'll go ahead and reserve an instance as well. Let's just go ahead and do that. So it's this link here. Okay, nope, that didn't work. Did I miss something? Info there. Okay, so the registration link is going to look like this. You're going to type in Let's see, put my email in here. We registered for the lab. You'll get a link for the lab, and if you click on the magic link, that'll take you right in. And then also from here, you could download the Getting Started guide, right? So I'm going to first do that, get the link to the Getting Started guide. That'll download, and then I can then go ahead and click on the magic link and take me into the lab. Okay. So when we see the lab, this is the lab I'll use for the duration of the workshop here, and you'll have a similar lab if you go ahead and do that. Okay. Okay, the other part of this is as you see, it can take a little bit of time to wake up the instance. The other part of this is the ADO environment. So I'm going to bring up my ADO environment. And if you'd follow along in the guide, if you had this setup guide, so this is the organization I'm using. I have a workshop 001 here. If you saw in the setup guide, there's a way to generate the project in your ADO organization, and we use the Azure demo generator. Okay, so I'll go ahead and do that. The create products link, I'm going to sign in, and this will take me into there. And in the lab guide, you'll see there is a link. Okay, the link basically points you to a file that sets up the project. Okay, so let me get that link up and running here. So just so you're clear on what I'm talking about, this link is on page 5 of the lab guide. Now, after the workshop is over, these lab instances will disappear for a couple of days, but this link should keep on working. So if you want to set this up in your own instance, you should be able to do that without a problem. So we provide instructions how to get a free ADO account. The free ADO account allows you to then go ahead and then create this project. The other thing you have to do with that free ADO account is with Azure DevOps, they no longer allow you to run pipelines without requesting permission to do so. The reason for that is because some time ago, it became a problem where folks were using the free Azure DevOps agents that build jobs. They actually started doing some Bitcoin mining with that, which is obviously that's the problem. That's not what the labs are for. So, you know, it was so they added an extra step to get the parallelism working, which is the ability to run pipelines. So now I'm generating the project in my Azure DevOps. This is the project I'm going to use for the workshop. So at this point, once we're done, we'll be ready to start the workshop. Okay. How are we doing, Eileen? Any questions?
Has everyone been able to get their instance and download the lab guide? If anyone hasn't, that's okay. Feel free to raise your hand here or send us a chat.
Okay. Once the project is created, and this is one I had created previously, this one is still generating. It takes a minute or so to generate the project. Once the project is created, the other part of this is to make sure in your organization, you have the plugin installed, or what they call in Azure DevOps an extension. Okay. Now there are instructions on how to get this. It's in the Visual Studio store. I'll just show you that real quick. And that gives you the ability to install this extension in your environment. And that's in this link here. I'm just going to cut and paste it from, there we go. So you're going to find under the Azure DevOps in the marketplace, you're going to find the ServiceNow extension. Okay, you just do a search for ServiceNow, and it's going to be the first one here. And the latest one is 1.38.0. And if you click on Get It Free, it'll allow you to choose which And the important thing is you need to log into this marketplace with the same Microsoft account that you use to log into Azure DevOps, right? And then you'll get a list of all your Azure DevOps projects, organizations, and the plugin, this extension is installed at the organization level. So any projects you have in this organization will be able to utilize it, okay? We'll come back to that extension in a minute, but that should be installed in your Azure DevOps environment, okay? All right, so now I believe if you have this project created in Azure, let me go back to my workshop here, right? We should be able to go ahead and actually get a pipeline to run. Now, we want the pipeline to run even before we connect ServiceNow to it, just to make sure you have that capability, okay? So once the project is created, we're going to go ahead and create the pipeline. Click on the first line there, Git. Again, this is all explained in the guide, okay? This is actually the first step of the guide: install an updated Parts Unlimited project in your organization. This step here is going to be step 5 on page 5 of the lab guide. So I click this, and now you'll see there's a YAML file that represents the pipeline. At this point, if I have parallelism enabled, I should be able to run the pipeline. Now, there are 2 different types of errors you might get. The first one is you might see that you don't have parallelism enabled, so it's going to tell you you can't run the pipeline. It's going to give you a link to fill out a form to request it, okay? That takes a day or 2, so you're not going to be able to do that in time to complete this lab. However, if you got the email a couple of days ago from Eileen, then you might have had the opportunity to do that. The other error you might get is that the pipeline itself doesn't, or you don't have the ServiceNow extension installed, right? So the pipeline itself makes a reference to it, even though at this point it's commented out. Just having that in there might create a problem where it's going to tell you, hey, this pipeline is referencing an extension that you haven't installed in your organization, okay? But if everything looks good, the pipeline should kick off. The first time you run this pipeline, it's going to take 1.5 to 2 minutes to complete, okay? So once you do that, you'll have a project with a completed pipeline. The other thing you'll have is a repo with all the files in it, including that pipeline file, right? And there's also the application itself. It is a real application. So the Parts Unlimited application, one of the reasons I like this application is, one, if you're familiar with a book called The Phoenix Project, this Azure tutorial application, Parts Unlimited, is based on the application from the Phoenix Project, which is a book that's kind of like the story of DevOps heroes saving a company, and it's kind of a fun read. It's called the Phoenix Project. So this application is based on that. And then the other reason I like it is because it has everything we need to demonstrate the capabilities. It even has some config data, for DevOps config if we want to use that in the future, but it also has unit testing and functional testing. And it also deploys a real application. So if you want to get to the point where you actually deploy it, there is a real application there called Parts Unlimited, which is about ordering auto parts and so on. So that's the application. So at this point, we should have also work items, right? So the work items are also part of this, and that's very useful for us because we're going to actually bring these work items into ServiceNow. Okay, so you'll see the pipeline will continue running. And eventually it will make its way, and all these circles should turn green. So you should see all stages of the pipeline complete. And that'll take about 2 to 3 minutes, maybe longer. Maybe if we're all doing it at once at the same time, the agents that are allocated for this type of thing in Microsoft will be tied up a little bit. So that might make it take a little bit longer. I've seen that happen when we've done other workshops, for example. So once this is complete, then we're in a position to go ahead and start connecting ServiceNow, our ServiceNow instance, to this lab, okay? And it looks like it's just about complete here for me. Okay, any questions, Eileen? Oh, I do see one question. what modules do we need to install on the ServiceNow side? So that's a very good question. The question is, what modules do we need to know? So first, the only thing you need for the purposes of what we're doing here is ServiceNow Change Velocity. Okay, so you'll see there's a bundle of applications inside the plugin manager in ServiceNow, and I'll show you what that looks like. That bundle has all the prerequisites you need, and it's called ServiceNow Change Velocity. It's one of the green shaded bundles when you go into the plugin manager. If you install that, it will install all of the spokes and all of the prerequisites that you need. This page always takes a minute or two to load, especially in these very small lab instances. But that's what you want to check. Eileen, any other questions that I missed?
I don't see any other questions, but hopefully everyone was able to follow along, have your instance, the guide. Joe was walking through the Azure DevOps portion where you have the Parts Unlimited projects that you will clone into your ADO.
All right. Okay, so while this is loading, I'm going to bring up the instructor instance here, and we'll go ahead and continue with the lab. All right, there we go. This is the DevOps Change Velocity. Right here. This is the bundle that you want to install, and it will install everything you need and the versions you need. Okay. DevOps Change Velocity. Okay, so that's there. So now you know which module you need. Okay, so now let's go back to our DevOps Change workspace, and we'll go ahead and get started with the lab. We are going to continue. It's called Lab 1. It's actually the only lab in this workshop because this is actually a subset of a bigger workshop that we've given to the partners. But we only have about an hour and a half, so we figured let's get you guys started with Lab 1, which is DevOps Change Workspace Project Onboarding, and that's going to be on page 7 of the lab here. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to connect the tools. Okay, so the process here is we are going to connect the tools, discover the resources in those tools. So, for example, in Azure DevOps, we actually have pipelines and Git repos and project plans, right? But in some cases, we only have project plans. Like when we connect to Jira, we don't see pipelines. We only see project plans. If you connect to GitHub, you're going to see the GitHub Actions workflows. So those are pipelines, but you'll also see the GitHub repos, for example, and GitLab, the same thing. For orchestration, you might connect to Jenkins. You're only going to see pipelines in Jenkins. You're not going to see repos. So depending on what tool you'll connect to, you're going to see different resources, okay? In some cases, you might need to connect to Jira for planning, GitHub for Git repo, and then Jenkins for your orchestration pipelines. All three of those tools might be involved in a project, and that's fine. But in this case, we chose Azure DevOps. Oops, no, this one here. Azure DevOps, because it contains all three tools, and it made the workshop possible to do in the time we had. Okay, so let me go ahead and bring that up again. Azure DevOps. Now, when you connect to Azure, you can connect at the organization level or the project level, and this is basically what we're going to do today in the lab is at the project level. So let me bring up that project again. Move this out of my way here. And in the case of the project, the URL for the project comes after the organization and then the project. So that's what we want. And we're going to bring that into the, let's close some of these windows so I don't get confused here. Okay. Now, the next step of this is pretty important. This is on the lab. Let me bring up the lab guide here just so you see which one it is. What we're going to do here, this is the getting started. We connected the tools, right? the next step here is we're going to add the token, the access token. Now, where do we get the access token? Right, this is on page 8 of the lab guide. Okay, so if we bring up the, we give it a tool name. Okay, so let's call this ADO, and because it's at the project level, I like to include kind of as a best practice the name of the project. Right, so in this case, it's WS001. So I'll do that, ADO WS001. So now if I have other tools that are scoped to different projects, they're going to show here. The other way you can scope access to projects is simply by the IDs that you use to connect. And we're going to do that here in a minute. So we need that token, right? So as this is happening here, I'm going to switch over to back to the project, and I'm going to create a token for this person. For this purpose, okay? So when you log into Azure DevOps, right next to the logo, the icon that represents your name, this little tile here, you have the user settings. In that menu, you'll have the personal access token. Okay, now this token, you see I have a bunch of them. If it's your first time doing this, you probably won't have any. I'm going to create a new token. Now, for the purposes of this lab, I'm going to give you full access. In the appendix of the lab guide, because I know we're always going to get these questions, is do I need full access? The answer is no. There are specific properties that you can use, but I'll go ahead and give it full access just to speed up the process. And I know when you're doing this at home, you don't want to have to deal with all the different permissions. But however, from a security standpoint, you're going to want to scope that correctly. And in the appendix of the lab guide, we do provide those details. And in fact, once I copied it, right? I'm going to now leave that there, and I'm going to go stick that in this access token field here, and we're going to go ahead and connect. Now, you see, you have the ability to use a mid server here. You only need to use a mid server if you're using an on-premise enterprise Azure DevOps server, okay? So that's in that case, you would need a mid server. This is true for any on-premise tool like a Jenkins or a Jira server, right? You would have to use the mid server. The mid server is like an agent that lives in your network and makes an outbound connection to ServiceNow to basically allow us to communicate with resources on your network. However, because this is the cloud-based Azure DevOps, we have the ability to go cloud to cloud and no mid server is required. Okay, so this will take a minute or two. Again, a lot of these lab resources are actually sharing resources in the data center. So when we're all doing this at the same time, it can slow things down. But for the most part, this will take a minute or two. And once this completes, then we can start discovering the resources that are available in Azure DevOps and add them to ServiceNow. Okay. So this is the permission check that I had mentioned earlier. Okay, so we're actually taking that token that you provided and making sure it has all the permissions. Now we do this so that if you don't hit any permission issues going forward. But you see here, I have everything turns green and the permission check looks good. It'll flicker in and out of that screen a few times, but eventually you should see that these are the actual permissions you need. So this is the list of permissions you need. What I did was I cut and pasted this into the lab guide so you would have it. It's also, of course, in our product documentation. Right, so I'm going to go ahead and continue. Even if the permissions come back false, you in many cases you should still continue, right? Because sometimes it's a specific capability that you're not even using that it says it's false. But what I'm saying is it allows you to continue even if you don't have all the permissions. Just be aware of what the implications of that are. Okay. All right, so now that the permission check is complete, what it's doing, it's going and looking for all the resources, and we're going to go through them one by one. So as I mentioned, Azure DevOps has the capability to orchestrate pipelines, but it also has Git repos. And then it also has project plans. So all of those capabilities exist in the Azure DevOps environment. Okay. Eileen, did you want to add anything here, or perhaps Graydon or Anand at this point?
maybe we can just have a quick show of hands if people are able to follow along. If you're able, to at least get, open up the connect to tool modal, connect to Azure DevOps. I believe in Zoom you can have some sort of emoji to raise your hand, or there's a raise hand button on the bottom of the Zoom bar if you're able to successfully follow along here.
Oops, that's the poll. We didn't do that yet. Okay.
All right, I got a couple of hands up that I saw.
Okay.
For the rest of the folks, if you're stuck at some point, whether it's getting the access token or getting the instance up, yeah, feel free to chat. But it looks like, Joe, maybe you got half the people here following along. But yes, thank you.
Yeah, I think half is good. We'll take half. Okay. Okay. At this point, we are not going to go through and restrict any groups or specify any owners. What this allows you to do is within the ServiceNow platform, actually scope who can access the tool record, who can manage the tool record. If you don't set these policies, basically only the DevOps admin will have that capability. And for our purposes, that's fine. So we'll go ahead and skip that. Now, this is a very important step. What we're doing here is we're actually configuring the Azure DevOps instance to send events to ServiceNow. Okay, so this is this is what requires a heightened level of permissions on Azure DevOps, is just for this one function right here. And what this allows us to do is basically tell Azure DevOps to set up a webhook, and those webhooks will actually send the events to ServiceNow as things are happening in Azure. And this is how we get the real-time information. Now, all of these lab instances have been set up with the same password for this DevOps integration user. And that password is now for DevOps, okay? And that means it's going to use this password on the Azure side to set up the webhook. And this user doesn't have a lot of permission. In fact, the only thing the user can do is actually send inbound events into ServiceNow, right? So it's limited in scope as far as permissions go. But once we have that in place, let's go ahead and configure Azure DevOps. Okay. I should mention that the O in now for DevOps, and if you saw this in the guide, that O is actually a 0. Okay. So it's now NOW for DEV, capital N and then capital D, and then 0 PS exclamation point, now for DevOps. So you can just cut and paste that right out of the lab guide. Okay, now that we've done that, let's go ahead and select the plans. In this case, it's going to have the WS001. Whatever the name of your project is, that's going to be the name of the plan. Okay, I'm going to select the plans. Now, if this was just Jira, then we'd be done because Jira only had project plans, right? But now I'm connecting to the repository here for Git. We'll go ahead and do that. And then, of course, these are the pipelines. I'm going to select both pipelines. Go ahead and do that. Okay. So like I said, if you're just connecting to Jenkins, you'll only see pipelines. You won't see Git repos. Azure DevOps is special in that it has both capabilities, all 3 capabilities, in fact. Okay, assigning services to pipeline steps. This is also a useful thing to do because understanding what happens in those pipelines and linking it back to application services and ServiceNow is extremely valuable to understand the impact of changes, for example, what services are impact, what related services are impact. Normally we do this with the production deployment. We're going to skip this step here because one, we're not using that pipeline, and 2, it's just beyond the scope of what we're trying to accomplish in the lab. But it's something that should merit some consideration, is to understand what CMDB CIs are impacted by events happening in those pipelines, right? Okay, so now everything is complete. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is create a new application. But before we do that, let's go back into our Azure DevOps project, and let's make sure those webhooks were set up. Okay, so we do that, and again, this is in the guide. What page of the guide is that? We should be up to, okay, now we're up to page 10. Okay, so page 10 in the guide. Let me bring that over here. I'm just going to have that available to us here. I'm going to maximize that. I'm going to maximize this, and I should be able to just swipe between them. Okay, so page 10, we're saying, okay, we want to see what service connections and what webhooks were created, okay? So if everything was successful, we go to project settings, and you should see the service hooks. And the service hooks are basically, specifies what events we want to send notification to ServiceNow about, and that's what you see here. So if that part worked, you should see these service hooks. And then the service connection is, we're going to reference this in our pipeline when we want to create the change record. In Azure DevOps, you have to create these external connections. You might see one for GitHub, you might see one for SonarQube, you might see one for some other DevOps tools. In this case, we have one for ServiceNow as well. And that was just created by that configure button that you just clicked on in the playbook. Okay. So if that looks good, we're going to go back to our playbook here and create a new application. Okay. The other thing you could do, if you don't have this open anymore, let's say you left to go to lunch and you come back, you could always click on the create application from the home page in the DevOps Change workspace. Okay. So you have that ability to do that as well. Okay, so so this is where I'm at for O2. I'm going to go ahead and click on the create application here. So I'm going to call my application Parts Unlimited. That's the name of that application, and that's the name of the project we're connecting to. Go ahead and create that. It doesn't matter if you use a space or not, you can do that. I think in the guide I use a space, so I'm going to go follow the guide and fix my typo. Okay. So once we create the application, we're going to have, now the application is a separate set of records in ServiceNow. However, we're going to link them to the projects and the plans and the pipelines we just discovered by connecting to the tool. Okay, so here I can say, let's associate the plans. And if you want, you can sort by the tools, right? So the tool that we're using, and I'll find that that project plan, that's from the DevOps boards. Okay, we're going to go ahead and associate that plan. We have work items in there that go back a few weeks. I'm just going to make sure I capture all of those work items by setting this back, at least a couple of months. Go ahead and import that data. Okay. Next thing we're going to do is next thing on the list is associate the repositories. Now your list, sometimes I've seen this in a different order. We have plans, repositories, and pipelines. It doesn't matter what order you do it. I'm just going down the line. Okay. We'll go ahead and associate the Git repo there. Again, I'll go back a little bit in time just to make sure I capture everything with the import. And then I'll go ahead and associate the pipelines next. Okay. I didn't need to click on that again. So this will go ahead and associate those pipelines. So when you're done, you should have one plan, one repository, and two pipelines associated with the Parts Unlimited application. Okay. Now, this is for the most part a manual step when you onboard an application. However, if you have like really good naming conventions where everything kind of begins with the same name, or you use tagging, tagging is another way to do it, where these repositories and the plans are tagged. We do have an onboarding API. So if you wanted to do this in bulk and you had all the information, you can create these app records and do the mappings in an automated way as well. Okay. All right, so once we've done that, let's see where we are. Okay, so now we want to see if we have the work items imported. Now, this work item step takes a few minutes, because behind the scenes, it's actually importing the work items. So that would be under plans. You go to the plan you have. And you should see about 120, or exactly 120 work items, okay, if you've imported all of them. Okay. So that's important, because if the work items are not imported, we won't be able to link them to the change record. So even if some of these work items are several months old, right? And we might have some in that case, then we can still link them to work items. It might be the case that when you commit some code, you link a work item from 2 months ago. We want to make sure that that's part of the record keeping in ServiceNow. Okay. So once that's complete, the next step is to see if we can track the pipelines. But there's a few steps we have to do before that, right? Tracking pipelines. Okay. So if you run your pipeline in Azure, okay. So if we go to back to the pipeline here, and this is my project. You see, I ran it once already. I'm going to run it again. When you run the pipeline, we're going to start tracking it. Now, it's not going to create a change record yet. That's a step we haven't done yet, but that's going to come a little bit later. Yeah. And if you're tracking the pipelines, let's go back to apps record. From the pipeline tab, okay, the first pipeline is the Parts Unlimited pipeline. If you click on the View Pipeline tab, this might take a second to load the very first time you do it. Bring this up over here. Oh, there are no pipelines yet. Okay, it's probably going to be a minute before we get that pipeline recorded. Okay, so the pipeline is running now. Usually it won't show up until the first, in fact, it definitely won't show up until the first stage is complete. Okay, so the first stage has to complete, and then we'll start seeing the pipeline record, because that's when Azure DevOps will start sending us events that this pipeline has started. It's basically the stages of the events have to complete, and then we'll start receiving the events, and then they'll show up in ServiceNow. Okay. This takes a minute or so, Eileen, so maybe another good point to stop for questions. Yeah. Is anybody stuck anywhere that we should maybe revisit?
Or just conceptual questions as well. Joe, I think a lot of people are following along, though, just at least watching minimally. So
yeah. Yeah, well, it's hard to watch and do the work at the same time. So I think it's good if we can take a quick little pause here and let people catch up. Okay. So I should add that, not all the data is collected in ServiceNow, like every single bit of detail, for example, from your project plans, right? When you look at the work items, there's probably tons of work notes for each of these work items. The work notes are not really our concern. If you wanted to see the work notes, we do provide a link to that work item in Azure DevOps, right? What we're concerned about is basically the type of work it is, and also the stage that the state that it's in. In this case, it's a work in progress. So those state changes are very important because obviously they impact the whole change to deployment to production process, but also the type it is. We actually record lots of metrics and data. For example, how long does it take to resolve defects versus how long does it take to deploy new features, for example. So those capabilities are all tracked in the dashboard. And we'll look at the dashboard at the very end of this so you can see the data. I mean, the whole point of one of the immediate values you'll get from this is the data being collected in the lab, right? In the tool. Just want to check one thing here. Okay, so this we're done with. Let me close this and back to pipeline here. Okay, so now that the pipeline is pretty much ran through to completion, and we click on that view pipeline, okay, we're going to go here a few times during the lab. So let's make sure that that you know how to get here, okay? So now I see this is the execution of that pipeline in Azure DevOps. It'll load up and we'll see all the stages here. Now, what if you don't see the pipeline here, and it's taken a minute to load, couple of things that might have gone wrong. Yeah, you see the test results are here, the artifact is here. There were no commits, right? I just ran it without committing anything, but it did accumulate some commits that had existed before the last run. So that's one of the other features. It'll make sure that all the commits are accounted for, all the test results. If you're doing some quality scans, like with Sonar Cube, they would show up here. In this case, we didn't open a change record. We just built and created the artifact, right? But we're going to make some modifications to that pipeline in just a minute. Now, if you don't see the execution of the pipeline in ServiceNow, the thing you should check is those webhooks, okay? If they're firing incorrectly here, you will see them some red in these attempts. So here I have 3 succeeded. When the pipeline ran, there was 3 state changes, and those were 3. If this is red, that means there's something wrong. Either you have some kind of firewall issue, or maybe you provided the wrong password for the DevOps integration user. Remember, that stage of the playbook actually created these webhooks, right? So it can talk back to ServiceNow. And if you put the wrong password in, you're going to get an error here, right? So that's the first thing you should check, okay, if that didn't work for you. All right. So the next part of this lab is now that we have the pipelines executing here, okay, when we see the stages, we're going to, and this is the last part of the hands-on lab, we're going to go ahead and we're going to update the YAML file, okay, to actually create change records. But before we do that, what we want to do is go into the steps of the lab and basically set what the behavior will be in ServiceNow when these events come in. How are we going to create that change record? What type of change record are we going to create? Okay, so to do that, let's go back to our workspace here and go back to our Parts Unlimited pipeline record. So if you don't know how to get here, if you close this window here, from the details from this tab here, okay, we're going to click on the Parts Unlimited application, and then we're going to click on the pipelines, okay, and then the parts unlimited pipeline will have all the steps in it, right? The only step we care about really is this precondition. What we've done is we set up a step specifically to open the change record, okay? Now we're gonna make sure that when we do open the change record, we click this box and we're gonna fill in what type of change record to open and what some of the information should be, okay? So we're gonna mark this as a prod deploy. Very important that we set this up so we know statistically what type of step this is, okay? And that, again, makes its way into the dashboard for all of the record keeping that we're doing. Configuration item we're going to select is parts unlimited, okay? And the approval group, in this case, we're going to use application development. So this is just what I have in the change approval process. Basically, we're not changing your change approval process here. What we're doing is we're taking your normal change approval process and we're making sure that it's accounted for whenever you have these DevOps pipelines. And then, of course, you could automate the stages of that change approval process, based on some of the data you're getting. But the first thing we want to do is make sure that then when this step executes, we get the we get the correct type of change record open, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and save that. Now, why a normal change? Why not a standard change? I get this question sometimes too. Normal changes are basically, it goes back to the idle specification, right? If you're updating application code or you're updating, infrastructure as code in terms of like configuration data, and then you're deploying it through a pipeline, this is something that's never been done before. This type of change, this specific change to the application hasn't been deployed before in production. So it has to be a normal change. That's the ITIL requirements for that. So we recommend as a best practice that these changes are normal changes. You might want to use standard change because it's faster and it makes its way without going through the change approval board. Well, automated approval policies will actually make the normal change just as fast as those standard changes if all the conditions are met. So that's very important. We're not giving up the governance of a normal change. We're not giving up the criteria for approving a normal change. We're just approving it in an automated way, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And now that this is saved, okay, again, back in the document here, this is step 3 of the lab 4 here. This is step 3 on page 15 of the lab guide, okay? So we're moving ahead at a pretty fast clip. I guess that's a good thing. Okay. So now that we've done that, we should be able to go and edit our pipeline, okay, back in our Azure project. Now, what we've done is we've already added the steps you need to change in the in your YAML file here. Now, if you're using a Mac, you basically can, I believe it's the same on Windows. You have the little Windows button on your keyboard next to the Alt key, and you do that with a /, or on Mac, it's the Command key and a /. That will remove, if you highlight this in the pipeline editor in Azure DevOps, that will remove all the comments, right? So now we've done that. However, this is still incomplete. You see, we have to replace this with our service connection. Remember, at the beginning of the lab, when we clicked on that configure button in the playbook, it went and created the service connection to connect back to ServiceNow, okay? We're gonna select that service connection now, click on the add button, okay? And now we're gonna save this, okay? And we'll go ahead and save that, all right? Now, these pipelines are not triggered to run in an automated way. So this won't kick off another pipeline. Basically, what you can do is you could have any commit actually kick off a pipeline. They call that continuous integration, right? We don't have these pipelines set up for continuous integration. So just saving the pipeline won't kick off a pipeline. We have to actually actively run it, but we're not going to do that just yet. I believe for this to, for what we're doing in the lab is we are going to, okay, we've done the service connection. We're actually going to make a change to some application code, and it's really just a README file, right? We're not actually changing code, but we're gonna make a change to something in the Git repo, and then we're going to commit it. And when we do that, then we're going to run the pipeline. Okay. How's everybody doing? Are we up to this point? Is everybody up to this step in the lab? Good. Thumbs up. Just looking at the attendees link, it looks like we're doing pretty good here. Yeah. Okay. So now we're going to go to our repo. So did I just want to make sure I saved that. So I'm going to go back to my pipeline, click on edit, and I should see everything there. Yeah, that looks good. Okay. Now I'm going to go to the repo. And this is basically what a developer does every day, right? They're probably not using the repo editor for this, but they might have like Eclipse or one of their IDE tools that they go into, and they make changes to things in the repo. In order to make a change, you have to click on the edit button, of course. I'll just add a few lines, a few spaces to this, and I'm going to go ahead and commit this, okay? So developers are constantly changing code and committing their changes back to the repo, right? And when they do that, as a best practice, we expect them to link, like let's say a bug or something into that commit. Basically telling everybody why they're making the change to the code. It's to resolve this particular bug, right? And I'll go ahead and commit that. And now that change has been made. That why is very important, because when we have a change record, we also need to know the why. Why are they making this change to production? So you'll see, not only do we show you the commit record, but we also show you in the change record the work item that's attached to the commit record. And it's a very important best practice that we expect developers to follow. And if they don't follow it, well, we can say, hey, you have commits without work items, right? You've committed code without work items. We're not going to auto approve this change. We're going to escalate that for a manual approval for that very reason, okay? So now that I've done this, I can go to the pipeline and click on it here. And we're going to go ahead and run the pipeline, okay? Now, when you run the pipeline, some pipelines, are more complex. They might have variables and things. You might want to specify different stages. We're just going to run the pipeline as is. And this will kick off another pipeline. This time, we expect the deployment stage to pause, okay? It's going to pause because it's going to be waiting for the approval of the change record, okay? Now, this takes a minute or two, so this might be a good time to go in and talk about the some of the data we have on the Insights dashboard here, okay? So as you see, as we're running through these pipelines, we are collecting lots and lots of data, and basically what you'll see is various tabs of data you see here, and then they get summarized on this first page. I do want to call your attention to a couple of these tabs, right? We have the accelerate metrics. Well, we call them the accelerate metrics, but most of the industry, they'll know these as the DORA metrics. So these are 4 metrics that actually came out of a project at Google called DevOps Research and Analytics, DORA. And what they were tasked with, it was just making sure people are adopting DevOps, but getting the benefits of DevOps, not just at Google, but at organizations all over the world. And so they came up with this working group, the DevOps Research and Analytics team. They started producing a report called the State of DevOps, and you might have seen it if you Google it. It's actually co-sponsored by Puppet most years. So every year they release a report, the State of DevOps, and they needed metrics to measure the state of DevOps in different industries. So you had finance, you had retail, you had insurance companies. They want to say, which industries are doing the best adopting DevOps, and they came up with these 4 metrics to measure it. What we allow you to do is to measure these metrics within your own organization. So you can say, which particular business app, is it the hotel app or based on the CMDB CI business app, right? We can attach that, say, okay, show me the metrics for that particular group and how well are they doing? Or which Git repository, for example, what are their metrics looking like, and so on. So those are the accelerate metrics or the DORA metrics. We also have other metrics like the flow metrics. So once you connect to the tools and the events start coming in, you'll be able to populate this dashboard. Now, there's a couple of performance analytics jobs that we need to turn on. We'll do that at the end of the lab. But this data here is populated by the DevOps tools, right? So for example, this one here, commit to deploy lead time. You have a commit, a developer commits something. How long does it take for that commit to get deployed to production? Right? So we know we catch the commit record. You saw that. But we also catch from the pipeline the production deployment record. Remember, we set that pipeline stage to indicate that was a production deployment. Well, that helps us understand the two timestamps we need to calculate this commit to deploy lead time. Okay, so those are some of the metrics you have. We also have flow metrics from value stream management. So you should see this in your instance. We loaded this demo data so you can play around with it and see what data you have. Quality metrics coming from the software quality tools that are part of your pipeline, a lot of good development metrics, commits, active committers, top committers, the top reverters, which are usually the top committers, right? And then, of course, change acceleration. This is very useful. This will actually help teams adopt the ServiceNow DevOps solution. They'll see, hey, these other teams are doing well, getting a lot of automated changes created. We want to have automated changes too. Let's see if we can improve our automated versus manual change numbers, right? And so all of this data is available that also, help identify which teams might be best suited for adopting an automated change process, okay? So how are we doing in our pipeline here? Okay, so here's our pipeline. And as I said, it's going to pause at the change acceleration stage here. Basically, it's waiting for a change to be approved, okay? But that means now I should have a change. And if I go back to my workspace here, go back to the change workspace, let's go back to that pipeline UI for that particular pipeline, and we'll actually see the change record there, okay? Is still alive, this machine? You guys still with me? How's it going? Okay, there's my back to my workspace. Let's go to my application. It's this one here, right? Okay. Let's go to the Parts Unlimited application, the pipeline. And then we can view the pipeline by clicking on the View Pipeline button. Okay, there we see our new pipeline. Okay, but before the production deployment happened, and it didn't happen yet, we see that there's a new change record here. Okay, now let's take a look at that change record. And here we see we've captured data from the pipeline itself. Okay, so for one, we have the artifact that was created, the commits, the software quality summary, okay, test summaries, and work items. So if you look at the commits, these are the commits that I made. And if any of these commits are linked, they should also have work items attached to them. Why might you not get the work items? Well, remember I said if you don't have them on the list, if they weren't imported, then they might not show up here. And that seems to be the case here. But normally you would see the work items attached and so on. The software quality data, right? We get that from, most of the time it's from a tool like SonarQube that does a quality scan. If that's part of the pipeline, we'll get that data. And then the test summaries are going to show you the results of all the test passes. This should match up exactly with what you see in your Azure pipeline. Okay, so if we, I'm going to close this because I keep clicking on it. If we look at this pipeline execution in Azure, right, and if we go back to here, there's a tab called test. Any plugin that you have that's executing test cases in your plugin, in your pipeline, the results are going to show up here. So if you're using JUnit, TestNG, some of the other tools like Selenium, for example, they report their test results to the test bed within the pipeline. We'll pick that up and report those results here. We get that information directly from the pipeline. In the case of SonarQube, we actually will make a separate request to get that software quality data into the change record. So you'll see in SonarQube, you'll see things like, bugs, and you'll see security scans and so on. I see a lot of that. Data is very useful for using it in your change approval policies. Okay, so that pretty much, if you get the change record and you get the data that you see here, that pretty much concludes what we were trying to accomplish with the lab. A couple of things I want to point out to you. In this particular lab, right, we didn't set up the change approval policies. However, this particular change actually wouldn't have been approved because we had commits without work items for one, but also the test results have to be 100%. In this particular pipeline, the test results are only 75%. So this is an example of some of the criteria you might use to automatically approve the change. So the change request reached a manual approval. So that means that somebody has to approve it, right? So I'm going to go ahead and approve it. And I think I'll do is set Bushra is the approver. Go ahead and approve it. Save that. So whatever you have in place for a normal approval in your instance of ServiceNow, that's basically what's going to happen at this stage. It's going to follow the normal approval process. Now you can also let me see, this might go to if you have CAB, for example, it'll go to CAB, right? But the idea here is we want to be able to automate as many of those stages as possible by looking at the same information the CAB would look at, looking at the analytics of the test results and so forth. So if that's taken place, then we should, we should be able to step by step go through this. And you see these changes are no longer required. Now this change now should go to the implement stage. And once that happens, that pipeline should go to completion. You see, and that's what happened here. The pipeline basically received that the change request was approved. It was okay, everything looked good. And then it can deploy the application. So the application deployment won't kick off until that change record is approved. You could also reject the change, right? If you reject the change, then that pipeline would fail in Azure DevOps. Okay, so that pretty much concludes what's in the lab guide. The other thing I wanted to show you, we talked about the DevOps, the data here in the dashboard, right? We don't turn the jobs on to aggregate this data by default. So I'm going to take you through the steps you need to do to turn that on. So from your in your instance, you want to go to your performance analytics jobs, and then you want to search for the DevOps jobs. I think there's 3 of them, or maybe there's 4 of them now. And this will bring up the, okay, so these are all the, see, now if I search by, I'm going to bring up all of them. If I search by name, I'm looking for DevOps, right? These 4 jobs, we want to make sure that they're active. Only a couple of them are active, okay? But we're gonna make the daily collection active, okay? And we're gonna make the historical one run at least once, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and, in order to save that, I gotta change my scope. I'm gonna set this to active, making sure it's running as the system administrator. And I'll go ahead and click. If you click execute now, it actually saves the record, I found. So you don't have to, in one click, you can save it and activate it and run it at the same time. Okay, now let me go back to that other historical one. This one you can, if the other ones are set to true, then that's great. You can leave this one. You could just run this one on demand. You only need to run this once. This will take all the data that had ran previously that we aggregated and add it to the dashboards. Okay, so I'll go ahead and change my scope again, and then I'll go click on execute now. You don't need to activate this on a daily basis. Like I said, this is just a one-time job. And we'll go ahead and run that. Okay, so that would get you everything you see in this instance. So you'll have connection to your DevOps tools, and then from there, you'll be able to start collecting the data, which is very valuable, and start identifying teams that you might want to set up for adoption. Okay. Any questions? Anything? Maybe Eileen, anything you wanted to add at this point? So that's the end of the doc.
Yeah, feel free. I can also unmute people if you have any feedback or questions, right? At the highest level, we took a tool like Azure DevOps. You come into DevOps Change Velocity, you connect your tools like ADO, will automatically get all the events for those tools, whether it's pipeline executions, commits, work items, and its updates. And from that, it's really powerful, right? Joe shows your insights. We showed using that DevOps data for traceability in your change request, automatically creating that change while pausing the pipeline. So there's a lot to do with that data. We have connections out to the CMDB as well. Just brief pause here. We're allowing you guys to speak up as well. So if you have any questions, just general comments or feedback. I know it was a little tough to follow virtually in a workshop with, looking at a screen and doing the actions at the same time. But feel free to unmute yourself at this point. If there's any questions or feedback, we'll pause for a little bit.
Okay. We do have a poll, right?
Hey, so we do.
Yeah.
Do we? But question there is a poll. Go ahead.
So what are your next steps? Your next steps for DevOps Change Velocity?
Should see a poll on your screen. Just take a second to pick a choice if you want other or unsure there as well. If you're just here for information or wanting to know more specifics on how to connect, we're also happy to reach out and do additional follow-on sessions as well.
Right, it looks like
we got one participant.
more than half of the okay, so we got a few more here. Seems like everybody wants to test this out in the next few months, right?
Joe, let me jump in here. And so it seems that we have unmuted lines. I'm not sure if Kiran, Marcus, Stefan, are you still with us? And if you are, love to just open it up and just a quick dialogue or a feedback for us, because doing this kind of a virtual lab virtually, it's pretty tricky. And so we are experimenting too. If you're still with us, love for your feedback to us. Did it work? Like, what can we do differently? And whoever wants to come off mute there, Kiran, Marcus, Stefan. Maybe not. That's fine. But You know, if you're still hearing this or look at this in the recording, I would love to get your inputs offline too, a little later.
Yeah.
Hi, yeah, sorry, I was having trouble clicking buttons in the poll. It just seems to read only to me. I don't know if you can hear me.
Huh.
But yeah, so a little so we've I'm a process lead, I'm not a techie at all, and so I was just kind of watching, but I've got my ServiceNow developer talking to one of our ADO developers. They've already managed to make a connection in a tool. And I've built a basic pipeline, but they're a bit stuck in terms of getting some of the information to transfer from one to the other. So maybe we could have if you can offer one of your techies, and I can set up a meeting with my techies, and hopefully you can help them out.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something we can.
Yeah. And Marcus, which we can definitely do that. We don't have to share your company on the open call here, but definitely we can continue the dialogue post this. You have Joe's and Eileen's contacts. If you don't, we should probably share with you. Feel free to reach back to us. We can continue this dialogue. And same thing we can do with you too, Stefan, and Kiran and whoever listens to this later.
Yeah. Okay, I guess the last thing I wanted to leave everybody with was just this slide here, and just let everybody know you don't have to jump in and do change automation all at once. There's a lot of value from just connecting the tools. There's a capability that allows you to take the data that you collect from the tools and simply attach them to change records. So if you add a change record, you can search for the data and go ahead and add it selectively, like in a manual way. And then, of course, you can have change records that open, but you don't take control of the pipeline, right? You just record the change records as record keeping, but you don't interfere with the pipeline. You know, these three steps here you could do in more of a passive way. The change automation actually involves creating policies and working with the DevOps teams in a more intimate way, so that, you know, this will take some time. But I think the first three stages of this adoption journey, you can do it in a passive way without, where the developers keep doing what they're doing. You connect to their tools, you collect the data, and you basically create these change records in an automated way without taking control of the pipeline. So that might be a good first couple of steps. And then, of course, the governance around change automation is extremely useful as well, of course. So that's something you're going to want to do. Okay. So I guess that is it. That kind of concludes the workshop today. I want to thank everybody who participated. Some of you actually took the time to register for a lab and reserve an instance and connect to an actual ADO environment, which is great. Others, you know, you just followed along on the screen. That's great too. Hopefully this will inspire you to go back and work with your teams to, you know, first set this up in a dev environment. And we'd love to get some feedback on and hear how that goes. Right. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I think at this point, we will conclude the workshop. There's no further questions. Have a good afternoon. Thank you.